Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going to be looking at educational leadership in the 21st century. And we're really lucky because we have some amazing insights from Ari Pokka, who is a Finnish education expert. He presented at the Third International Education Conference, and Finland, as you know, is like always at the top of the list when it comes to education. So I'm really excited to kind of dig into what they're doing differently over there.
Well, yeah, it's interesting what Pokka was talking about because he really emphasized these massive global shifts that we're seeing right now. And he even compared it to like the post-World War II era. And, when you think about it, social media and all the anxieties that young people are facing about the future, and then globalization, you throw in the climate crisis, and even like the shift in values that we're seeing post-pandemic, it's like it's a lot for anyone to deal with,
Right.
let alone students.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, when you put it that way, it really does seem like kind of a monumental time. So it sounds like Polk is saying that education really needs to get a major overhaul to keep up with the times.
Absolutely. He's like, we got to move away from these outdated practices. Things that just aren't serving students anymore. He specifically called out things like top-down leadership structures, centralized decision-making, and like this real focus on just knowledge acquisition instead of skill development. And he also talked a lot about the need to be proactive instead of reactive to change.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So less memorizing facts and dates and more like actual skills that you can apply. What does that actually look like, though? Like, what does that shift actually look like in practice?
Well, he's a big proponent of what he calls competence-based education. And so it's like, instead of just testing you on what you know, it's more about evaluating your ability to actually use your knowledge and skills in like real-world situations. So like think project-based learning, where you're actually applying what you're learning instead of just regurgitating it on a test.
Oh, yeah. I like that. So instead of just a letter grade, you get a much more holistic picture of what a student can actually do. It seems like a much more effective way to actually get kids ready for the real world.
Exactly. And it really ties into another concept that Proka highlighted, which is this idea of distributed leadership. So instead of concentrating all the power at the top, he thinks we should be empowering teachers and staff to actually make decisions and like drive innovation within their schools.
Oh, that's interesting. Isn't that kind of a big change from the way that a lot of schools operate now? I mean, giving that much autonomy to teachers seems pretty radical.
It is a significant shift, and it requires a high level of trust in educators. But Poka argues that, teachers are the ones on the front lines. They're the ones who know their students best, and that giving them more agency can actually lead to better outcomes for everyone involved.
Okay, so it's about trusting teachers to be professionals, basically,
Right.
and giving them the freedom to adapt and innovate. But isn't there a risk that things could become inconsistent or even chaotic if you don't have a strong central authority? How does Finland address that potential downside?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a concern that a lot of people have. But Finland has figured out a way to address that. So they have a really strong national curriculum that kind of provides this framework for what students should be learning. But within that framework, schools and teachers have a lot of flexibility in how they actually deliver that content and how they assess student learning.
Oh, so it's like guidelines, but not like a strict set of rules.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can still have some consistency,
Right.
but it also allows for more innovation and,
Exactly.
adaptation.
And to make sure that everything is still high quality. Finland invests a lot in teacher education. So all teachers there are required to have a master's degree, which includes a ton of pedagogical training. So this high level of expertise gives them the confidence and the skills to make those decisions and handle that autonomy.
Wow. So every teacher has a master's degree that's really different from a lot of other countries where teaching is often undervalued and underpaid.
Huge difference. But Finland recognizes that teachers are like the cornerstone of a successful education system. And they're willing to put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah. It seems to be working if you look at their rankings.
For sure.
So we've talked a lot about trust and autonomy and these highly qualified teachers. But what about the student experience? What's it actually like to be a student in a system like this?
Well, Finnish students have a lot of freedom and flexibility in their learning. They get to have more choice in the subjects that they study. And there's a big emphasis on hands-on experiential learning.
Okay, so less sitting in a classroom and more like actively engaging with the material. Does that mean there are fewer lectures and tests?
Definitely a shift away from that kind of passive learning and rote memorization. Finnish schools prioritize things like critical thinking, problem solving, and collaboration. And they encourage students to really be active participants in their own learning. and to actually apply their knowledge to real-world situations.
So it's a much more engaging and empowering approach.
Yeah.
But that would require a pretty big shift in the curriculum and how teachers teach, right? How do they actually make this happen?
Well, one of the key elements is that they integrate different subject areas. So instead of teaching subjects in isolation, Finnish teachers will often kind of weave them together. Through these interdisciplinary projects and themes, this helps students see the connections
Hmm.
between different areas of knowledge, and they can start to see how what they're learning is relevant.
Makes sense. So it breaks down those barriers between subjects
Yeah,
and encourages them to think more holistically.
exactly. Another really important aspect is the way they use technology. So Finland has been a leader in using technology in education, but not just for the sake of using technology. They use it in a really strategic way to enhance learning and personalize the experience for every student.
Right. So it's not about replacing teachers with computers,
No.
but about using technology as like a tool to support the learning process.
Exactly. So, for example, they might use online platforms for collaborative projects or simulations to explore complex concepts, or even adaptive learning software to provide personalized feedback and instruction.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Sounds like they're really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in education. But I'm curious about the social and emotional aspects of learning. Do those get lost when there's so much emphasis on skills and innovation?
Not at all. Finland puts a huge emphasis on student well-being and creating a supportive and inclusive school environment. They have a great system of student support services, and teachers are trained to recognize
Yeah.
and address the
Yeah.
emotional and social needs of their students.
Okay, good. So it sounds like they found a balance
Yeah,
between like academic rigor and the well-being of their students.
exactly.
And it seems to be reflected in the outcomes, right?
Right.
Their students score really well on all the international tests,
Insistently.
but they also report high levels of satisfaction
Yeah,
with their education and just their overall well-being.
exactly.
So it seems like the Finnish models is getting great results.
Hmm.
But I mean, every system has challenges, right?
Of course. Pokka did talk about some of the things that Finland is facing, like their declining birth rate, which could lead to fewer students and put a strain on resources.
That's a valid concern. So how are they addressing that?
They're being proactive. They're investing in things like lifelong learning initiatives, and they're exploring new ways to attract and retain teachers. And they're looking at how to structure schools and deliver education in a way that ensures equity and accessibility for all students, no matter where they live or their background.
It's pretty inspiring to see that they're so committed to adapting and evolving, even when things are tough. They're always trying to make things better.
They don't just rest on their laurels. It's really a culture of continuous improvement, and they're always willing to experiment.
It really is all about doing it your own way,
Yeah,
which seems to be kind of a theme
it
in
is.
Finnish education.
Totally. It's all about empowering individuals, trusting their expertise, and giving them the freedom to find creative solutions.
That's a really powerful message, and it goes way beyond just education, you know.
Absolutely.
It's about trusting people to do their best work and giving them the autonomy to find solutions.
It's something we could all use a little more of.
I wonder what would happen if we applied that philosophy to other areas of our lives,
Yeah, like what?
like our workplaces or even just our communities in general.
That is something to think about.
Seems like we have a lot to learn from Finland,
Definitely.
not just about education, but about how to build a better society. We've covered so much in this deep dive, but I'd love to hear your final thoughts. What makes their approach so successful in your opinion? And what lessons can we learn from them?
That's a big question. I think one of the most important takeaways is that there's no one right answer when it comes to education. What works in one place won't necessarily work the same way somewhere else, but what we can learn from Finland is the importance of those core principles.
Like what?
Well, we've talked about trust, autonomy, and collaboration, but even beyond that, it's about having a really clear vision for what you want education to achieve, and then creating a system that actually supports that vision. Finland has a very strong belief in the power of education to empower individuals and build a better society. And you can see that belief reflected in everything they do.
So they don't just see education as a way to get a job. It's more like a fundamental human right.
Yeah.
And it's crucial to building a fairer world.
Exactly. And I think that message resonates with a lot of people, no matter where they're from. We all want our kids to have the opportunity to live meaningful lives and make the world a better place.
It's a powerful vision. But it requires us to be honest with ourselves
Right.
about our own education systems.
And be willing to change things.
Exactly.
But Finland shows us that it is possible to create a system that really puts students first and empowers teachers and prepares young people for the future.
So where do we go from here? How do we take what we've learned and make it happen in our own communities?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? There's no easy answer. But I think it starts with those honest conversations about what we value in education and what kind of future we want for our kids.
Okay.
We need to be willing to question things, experiment with new approaches, and learn from each other.
It sounds like a call to action for everyone,
It is.
no matter what role we play in education,
Yeah, we can all do something.
whether it's advocating for policy changes, or supporting teachers who are trying new things, or just encouraging a love of learning in our families and communities.
Exactly. And remember, change takes time.
Yeah, doesn't happen overnight.
That's a process.
We need to be patient and persistent.
And be willing to learn from our mistakes.
It's a marathon,
It is.
not a sprint.
Pace yourself, get support, and don't lose sight of the goal.
So we're back and ready to kind of wrap up our deep dive into the future of education. I have to say, this conversation has really gotten me thinking about all the possibilities for change.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's been really insightful, especially looking at how Finland does things. It really challenges us to rethink what education could be.
I think one of the things that struck me most about the Finnish model is how much they emphasize equity. It seems like they really want to make sure every student has access to a good education, no matter where they come from or what their background is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just about giving everyone the same opportunities. It's about creating a system that actually recognizes and values the unique strengths and needs of every student. They get that one size fits all just doesn't work.
And that goes back to Pokka's idea of doing it your own way, right?
Exactly.
It's about empowering educators and communities to find the solutions that work best for them, instead of trying to force everyone into the same mold.
It's about trusting people to know what's best for their own context and giving them the freedom to innovate and experiment. Of course, you need some level of trust and accountability, but Finland seems to be doing pretty well with that.
It makes you wonder if all this standardized testing that we do is actually holding us back from creating a more personalized and equitable system.
It's a good point. I mean, standardized tests can give you some useful information, but they also tend to focus very narrowly on just a few things, and they can create a lot of pressure, which often leads to teaching to the test, instead of focusing on what students really need.
It's like we're more worried about the scores than we are about the kids themselves.
That's exactly what it feels like sometimes. And it can really stifle creativity and discourage risk-taking. It can make both students and teachers feel anxious and inadequate.
So if we want to move towards a system that's more personalized and equitable, we probably need to rethink how we assess students. Maybe we need to look at different ways of evaluating them
I think that's key.
that capture a wider range of skills and abilities.
Yeah, we need to find ways to measure the things that really matter, like critical thinking and problem solving, creativity, collaboration, and the ability to actually use what you've learned in real life.
And maybe even more importantly, we need to create a culture that values those things instead of just focusing on grades and test scores.
Absolutely. It's about shifting our mindset from just academic achievement to a broader view of what it means to be a well-rounded and engaged person in the 21st century.
It's about preparing students for life,
Exactly.
not just for a job.
Yeah. And that's where I think Finland's emphasis on well-being and social-emotional learning is so important.
Yep.
They understand that academic success is just one piece of the puzzle. For kids to really thrive in today's world, they need to be resilient and empathetic, and they need to have a strong sense of self-worth.
So we need to nurture the whole child,
Yes.
not just their academic abilities.
Exactly. We need to create learning environments that are challenging, but also supportive and engaging.
And that brings us back to the importance of trusting and empowering teachers.
Right.
They're the ones who are with the students every day.
Mm.
They know what they need, what they're capable of.
We need to give teachers the freedom and the resources to adapt their teaching to different kinds of learners and to create learning experiences that are engaging and relevant.
And we need to actually support them in doing that, not just with words, but with concrete actions,
Yeah.
like providing professional development opportunities,
Yeah.
giving them a say in how things are run,
Yeah.
and creating a culture that values their expertise.
It's about recognizing that teachers are professionals and treating them accordingly. And it's about understanding that investing in teachers is investing in the future.
Well, it's been an amazing journey exploring all these ideas with you. We've talked about the challenges facing education around the world And we've seen some really inspiring things happening in Finland. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the most important message is that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of education.
I completely agree.
Whether we're educators, parents, policymakers, or just concerned citizens, we can all make a difference. And like Pokka said, we should do it our own way. Find the solutions that work best for our own communities.
Exactly. Let's learn from each other. Challenge the way things are done, and never stop trying to create an education system that helps every student reach their full potential.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some new ideas and inspired you to keep exploring the possibilities for transforming education.